What's up, friends? Before we hop into the show, I got to tell you about this awesome thing that Manscaped is doing. Did you know that one man every hour, every day is diagnosed with testicular cancer? And Manscaped, they save balls. This means not only designing the right tools for the job, but raising awareness for the ball-busting disease, which is the most common form of cancer among men ages 15 to 35. That's right, 15 to 35. And as part of Manscaped's brand mission, their partnership with the Testicular Cancer Society aims to educate and entertain while spreading a very important message about early detection and self-screening to protect yourself and men's health issues and cancer risk. So first and foremost, go get your balls checked. Next, grab a Lawnmower 3.0, use code DNVR to save 20% plus free shipping and help the proceeds go towards an amazing cause. Buy the performance packages and crop mops today to contribute to the We Save Balls initiative they have going on at Manscaped, and use that code DNVR to save 20% off the purchase, get free shipping, and help a great cause for the entire month of March. So make sure to check them out over at Manscaped. All right, Mace, let's hop into the show.
Number one for the one and only DNVR. Two goes out to Zach, Mace, Arcade, and the bar. Three for Mr. B in that old trophy case. None supposed to wait for, well, bring on the chase. Out on the field at Mile High, Broncos win is our desire. Coupled with Breck, Brew, and a friend, bleed orange and blue to the bitter end. Come and join us, DNVR. We are DNVR.
Welcome into the DNVR Broncos podcast on this Monday to kick off free agency. I'm your host, Zach Stevens, joined by my man, Andrew Mason. Before we hop into the show, got to tell you about our presenting sponsor, MSU Denver Online. MSU Denver Online puts a dynamic education at your fingertips without forcing you to decide between earning a degree and living your life. MSU Denver is the Colorado institution providing rigorous and affordable online programs taught by professors who bring the real world into the classroom. MSU Denver graduates use their relevant degrees to land coveted jobs. So make sure to go check them out. Whether you want to take one class or you want to graduate, head over to MSU Denver Online. My boy, Mace, it's good to see that you survived the snowstorm and are here for the start of free agency.
Yeah, and it's good that I can be here by simply walking to my office at home, because right now can't get out of the driveway. It's actually to the point where we've decided to just pay somebody, $30 to take care of shoveling the driveway, shoveling the sidewalks, etc., because it was just too much. I actually shoveled on Saturday night, and I thought, okay, let's get started. Let's do it. So about 11:45 midnight on Saturday, I'm out there, shoveling away. A fat lot of good that did, because I put down some ice melt on the sidewalks, and currently the ice melt is sitting under about 24 inches of snow right now.
Yeah, that won't really help. You're not worried about ice right now.
It was throwing deck chairs off the Titanic at, just, oh man, it's wild. There's actually, I put this out on Twitter last night. There's a drift of snow that was blown by the wind as such to where it looks like a wave of snow is about to crash into my garage.
Yeah, that was like waist high, if not even higher.
Yeah, it goes about halfway up a garage. So kind of a standard garage door, y'all know. Then it's halfway up there. It's just wild. The only part I've cleared is there's a little poop and pee path for the puppies. A lot of alliteration. Poop, pee, puppies path that I've cleared in my backyard, and that probably took about 25, 30 minutes, because you had to kind of just go by layer. You get the top layer off, and then you get the next layer off, and oh boy. And you know what? It could warm up in the next week to 10 days. This snow in some form or fashion is going to be with us for several weeks, even if it's middle of April and we're still seeing these massive snow piles in strip mall parking lots. So hope everybody enjoys it. But the positive side is, Zach, I was thinking about it when I woke up this morning. All the fields are going to be lush and green. It's going to look like Ireland when this is done. And, maybe that's kind of a metaphor for free agency that's going to start. You just get through this period, the Broncos make their moves, and maybe on the other side, once it's all melted, you've got a nice, lush, green, ready-to-go football team.
And Mace, I also think that this storm had a little preview for all of us on what could come with the Broncos in free agency. And what I mean by that is, Mace, the storm was supposed to hit us Friday night, and Saturday was supposed to be terrible, and Sunday was supposed to be bad as well. Well, Saturday morning comes, there's no snow. There's no snow at all. And, people are complaining left and right about where's the snow. I personally was very bummed out that there wasn't snow, and it just seemed like all the hype was going to fall flat on its face. Well, then Saturday night rolls around, and really Sunday, it really took off. And in one day, we had the fourth biggest snowstorm in Denver's history, with over 24 inches of snow in just one day, the fourth biggest. And Mace, that's what we may see with the Broncos in free agency. And what I mean by this is, Mace, the past 10 years under John Elway, we have been used to seeing the Broncos go out and hit big, not disappointing at the start of free agency, getting, the big time names, and also the big time deals. Juwan James wasn't necessarily a huge name, but he was a big time deal. That happened 2 years ago tonight. The very first day of free agency is when that happened. Opened with a bang. Well, under George Payton, Mace, I'm not quite sure we're going to see very many bangs happen right away. It may take a couple of days, or heck, even a week or two, for the free agents to start trickling in, and then they may start piling up, because the Broncos right now have the fifth most cap space, or the top 5 cap space in the NFL. So this storm kind of gave us a good preview of just hold your horses, sit back, relax. Things will come together eventually. But Mace, the first thing that needs to happen, and priority number 1 for the Broncos as free agency opens today and officially gets underway Wednesday afternoon, is the Broncos have to figure out what they're going to do with their own guys. And a little surprised that all of this has led, or has waited till now. You not only have the decision on Von Miller that you have to make, pretty much saying if he's coming back, you also have to make the decision on Kareem Jackson. And then you also have to make the decision on your RFAs, Mace. You give Tim Patrick, Alexander Johnson, and Philip Lindsay second-round tenders, they're back next year. You don't, they're probably gone.
Yeah, and the Broncos have kept things close to the vest. I think it came up last night in a discussion on Twitter how we haven't seen the leaks that normally we see. Usually we've got a good idea on things. Not anymore. It's a new era. It's the close to the vest era. So we're kind of left guessing a little bit. You know what? I think that's a good thing. It may not be good for us and what we do in this business, but it's probably good for the Broncos. Now, that being said, the fact that they haven't gotten anything done, let's say Shelby Harris, for example, okay, because the RFA deadline is still right there with the start of the new league year. We're only in legal tampering. The new league year is still 2 days away, so they don't have to have the RFA tenders in on Philip Lindsay, Alexander Johnson, Tim Patrick until that point. But Shelby Harris, if nothing gets done here in the next 14 minutes as we record this, then anybody can talk to him. And then you put yourself open to risk. And oh, by the way, with Shelby, yes, this is going to be a depressed market league-wide, because the cash budgets, forget about the cap, the cash budget for teams aren't going to be what they normally are because of the loss of revenue. So you'd say probably a third to half the league may be tightening their wallets a little bit, even if they've got good cap situations. But what works in Shelby's favor is this. It's not a good free agent interior defensive line class, especially once Leonard Williams got the franchise tag. And it's a horrible interior defensive line class in the draft. And don't quote me, quote Daniel Jeremiah of NFL Network, who said that there is not interior defensive lineman in this class we're taking in round 1. So all that means that Shelby Harris being on the open market, if again nothing is done here in the next 13 minutes, that puts some risk into play for some team looking at the landscape and saying, if we're going to get some help, we don't have many options here. He may be the best option. And that would hurt the Broncos if they lost Shelby Harris. It would, they got by without him last year. I don't think it's something that they should want to try to do again, to try to get by without Shelby Harris. And besides, don't you want somebody who chased down Tyreek Hill? And oh, by the way, when he chased Tyreek Hill down, did it when he was coming off a bad bout with COVID, when his stamina was affected? That's the kind of guy I want on my team if it's Mace, the GM. But you're dealing with a lot of other things. You're dealing with the price tag, etc. Maybe the Broncos aren't going to make a deal. We'll see. I think they want Shelby Harris back, but as with anything, it's wanting a guy at the right price.
Right. You're exactly right. And Tickle Pickle comes in our comment section. Love the name, and says, wish Madden ratings were better for Denver with Shelby. Shelby is only a 75. And
that's 75.
Exactly. And yes, I certainly think Shelby Harris is more valuable to the Broncos than what a 75 Madden rating would be. So Mace, I ask you this, where would you rank Shelby Harris and the defensive line for the Broncos entering free agency? I guess we can start with the most important thing that the Broncos have to do entering free agency. And we'll put, deciding on Vaughn and Kareem Jackson, we'll put those to the side, and that can play into this equation. What's the most important thing? What is the number one need and rank that the Broncos have entering free agency?
Cornerback 1. Now, doesn't mean they're going to necessarily fill it. They could look to the draft as well. But if you want maximum flexibility going into the draft, and I think that is something that's going to be a priority for George Paton, is making sure that he can go in myriad directions, that he could trade down, pick a position that drops, like say a quarterback happens to drop to 9 that they love, or even trade up. He wants to have the maximum amount of possibilities. And that means, even though you could look at it and say, well, if we stay at 9, we're going to get Patrick Surtain or Caleb Farley, I think they're going to try to make sure they've got a top cornerback in there, at least top in their room for this year. And when I say for this year, that's where I say I might mean that they take a look at Xavier Rhodes, who's good last year, terrible in 2019. George Paton drafted him in Minnesota. If he's more like the Xavier Rhodes of 2020 with Indianapolis than the 2019 with Minnesota, you have somebody who can fit the bill. Now, he'd probably be only on a 1-year deal. Maybe it would be a 2-year deal with all the guarantees in year 1. But I think something like that is a direction the Broncos may try to go in pretty early, because you look at the roster right now and say, what is the biggest hole? It's corner. And it's not particularly close based on what the roster looks like right now in terms of first and second on that list.
Yeah, and Mace, I agree with you, everything you said about corner. I'm putting it number 2. What comes in at number 1 for me is quarterback. And here's what and this may be just more of a team thing than in terms of free agency, what their true priority is like today in free agency. But when you take names off everything with the team last year and you just look at position, Mace, the Broncos' worst position without a doubt last year was quarterback. And so that puts it as number 1 priority. Now, the Broncos can address it in the draft. They may not choose to hit it in free agency, but that's their number 1 position of need entering free agency. But I agree with you. I think that they will hit and rank cornerback higher in the free agency part right now, because they can fall back on the draft. And like you said, Mace, getting a good cornerback now, even getting 2 cornerbacks, does not take them out of the Patrick Surtain, Caleb Farley trade back at J.C. Horn. That does not take them out of that at all. Now, if you go spend $25 million on Jameis Winston, that takes them out of the quarterback in round one. Very, very likely scenario. But really, the Broncos aren't going to go out there and spend $20 million on a cornerback. So whatever move they do, they'll still be in it.
Right. And realistically, even though George Payton was at the pro day for Trey Lance last week, and even though from all indications he's going to check out these other quarterbacks that are in the top 10, probably I can't see him checking out Trevor Lawrence because everyone knows, and he's already had his pro day. Everyone knows he's going to Jacksonville, but right. I think he's going to check out these. I think he's going to do due diligence on Mac Jones. He's going to do due diligence on Justin Fields. He's going to do the same thing on Zach Wilson, I would imagine, but that isn't the most likely outcome here. The most likely outcome is that they bring in a hedge. It's just the degree of the hedge. Jameis Winston would be interesting. The Saints have given every indication they want him back, but again, now that we're getting here, the clock is ticking down toward free agency. You do reach the point where he can pick up the phone.
Yep.
And you do bring that risk, at least from the Saints' perspective, into play. The thing, and I wrote, of course, about Jameis Winston. I decided to close my quarterback series with Jameis Winston.
Love it.
Well, for a lot of reasons. First of all, he's the biggest boomer bust guy out there if he indeed entertains offers to be out there. I mean, someone might be getting a guy who is ready to launch into the elite of quarterbacking. But you also might get a guy who never figures out the turnover problem. I mean, one thing I pointed to in the story is that 4 weeks into the 2019 season, or actually 5 weeks, pardon me, because it came off a good 4-game stretch. He had a very bad week 1. Then he plays a 4-game stretch that's probably the best of his career. Included in that, absolutely shreds a Wade Phillips LA Rams defense in the process. Bucks put up 55 on the Rams. Winston in that offense put up 48. And I remember coming out of that stretch thinking, he might sign a long-term deal. Maybe Jameis and Bruce Arians are perfect together. Right. So there was that glimpse. There was that gleam. And then he threw 5 picks the next week when they go off to London. And, it's what's so maddening with Winston. But when he's playing at his top level for multiple weeks, he's had those stretches where he's looked like one of the best quarterbacks in football. But he always does something undermine it. So what did he get out of last year? What happened with Sean Payton? Was that enough of kind of football rehab, QB rehab? He had LASIK. Did LASIK help him out? Couple months after LASIK, he talked about how he could read street signs for the first time in his life.
Oh my goodness. Just wild.
Yeah, I mean, just crazy. I mean, think about not being able to read street signs and you're driving around. I mean, gosh, you're kind of a menace to the road at that point. But hey, good for him that he figured that out. But he's definitely the most intriguing of the free agent quarterback prospects. But the question is, do the Broncos want intriguing? Do they want to say, okay, let's get the best guy we can to compete? Or do they just want somebody who, if he doesn't win, can be that backup, can be that mentor, etc.? I mean, that's where you come into the Ryan Fitzpatrick, Andy Dalton conversation. I think I'd be fine with Fitz. I think Andy Dalton, your Jacoby Brissett, your
just no sexy factor.
Yeah, you're getting into the meh territory here, and and then certainly there's another level of quarterbacks I didn't get into, but it's like the Colt McCoys and the Mike Glennons, and it's like if those are the guys you bring in.
Oh no!
I mean, Blake Bortles is on the market.
No,
let's bring back Blake Bortles, right? I mean, if that happens, Zach. Woo! Oh gosh!
Oh man!
Yeah, there's going to be an emergency. If Blake Bortles is the guy they were again, there's going to be an emergency podcast about how the Broncos aren't serious about what they said about regarding competition at quarterback.
Or if it's a quarterback to that level, Mace, then I think it means round 1 quarterback they're locked into. If that's the move they're making,
or they're locked into Drew Lock.
Man, yeah, and from
They
everything
believe in
we've
Drew
heard and
Lock.
seen, it doesn't seem like they're, locked in
Mhm.
on Drew. So, Mace, where does quarterback come in for you on these rankings? You have corner first. Okay,
Number
perfect. So
number two.
we just flipped
Right.
those, and I think it makes total sense why you have corner back number one. I totally understand that. So where are you going for 3 now? Let's see if we agree on this one.
Honestly, it's another corner.
Oh,
Based on the
wow.
roster right now, number crunching in the past month and looking at the value on guys, I think if the Broncos really want to make sure they are backstopped at corner, because Bryce Callahan is injury prone. Michael Ojemudia, you're optimistic about, but I don't know if you're optimistic about him as a CB1. I think you're optimistic about him as a number 2 or maybe a number 3. Saying
Right.
Bassey, he did some good things last year, but he's coming off the ACL injury. So I look at the cornerback position. I think there are 2 tiers here. I think you'd like to get somebody who is going to clearly step in and be a starter. So that's an Xavier Rhodes. If they want to go younger, it could be somebody like William Jackson from Cincinnati, who I really like. I could see a Mike Hilton from Pittsburgh stepping into a broader role and him being a good fit if they bring him in. But then I think you get into the prove it class, the guys who are really the dented cards at cornerback, the ones who have some potential, who could be really good scheme fits, but they struggled for whatever reason. Like Chidobe Awuzie in Dallas had a hamstring injury last year, came back, wasn't the same, got benched. Kevin King, Green Bay. The world saw him. Scotty Miller was torching him down the left sideline at Lambeau Field back in January. Desmond King, guy who was an all-pro with the Chargers, eventually got traded to the Titans. These are guys who I think are good scheme fits, and it's possible if you kind of play your cards right. Let's say it's Xavier Rhodes on a $9 million deal, and one of these other guys on a prove-it deal of about, say, $4 to $4.5 million. Effectively, you could replace AJ Boye with 2 guys, not just one.
Right, exactly, Mason. So I totally understand where you're coming from there. And then again, you still can take a corner at number 9, because if you get 2 corners, Mason, they're not going to be $12 million guys. Like you said, you're going to be replacing them with maybe a $7 million guy, $6 million guy, $9 million guy, $4 million guy. And so that would be a commitment there, but it's a necessary commitment, one that you absolutely have. And Mason, you threw out a name there, William Jackson. We've had a lot of people in the comment section, including the Nagalator, just pounding the table for William Jackson.
Right.
That's a hot name out there.
Yeah, he'd make a lot of sense. And you see looking at that cornerback room that Nagalator says William Jackson, Bryce Callahan, Michael Ojemudia, and Caleb Farley or Greg Newsome, you'd be excited about that room. I think you'd really like the possibilities there if they go in that direction. The thing is, though, the Broncos do not want to be locked into having to stay at 9 and take a corner. They want maximum flexibility, and frankly, the most likely outcome, if you had to handicap it, is trading down. And if you don't have corners settled in free agency, you won't have the flexibility to trade down when the time comes. You don't want to be sitting there and saying, well, we got a really good offer coming in, but boy, we have to take a corner. George Payton, I think, wants more flexibility. John Elway would kind of locked in on certain possibilities that he wanted to do. Like a way the Broncos worked on roster construction in regards to the draft would be they would go into the draft, have a pretty good idea what they thought their roster would be come week 1, and then if it was a year where they said, we've only got we've got 7 roster spots, so we can trade out of some day 3 picks because we really only have 7 spots on the roster for draft picks. I know Mike Shanahan at times operated that way as well in terms of the draft process. That's not how George Payton is going to operate. It's not how he's indicated he's going to operate. He talks about having more picks, more possibilities. So they're not looking at it and saying, okay, we basically have 8 spots for draft picks so we can have 8 picks. They're not looking at it that way anymore. That's not how Peyton sees it. That's one thing he's talked about in terms of how he wants to have additional picks. So this could be the asset acquisition year involving trade downs. And funny thing is, actually, in terms of just having a high volume of picks, even if they're not high quality, they're kind of set with a bunch of 7th round picks already. So they're moving in that direction. But I think it should be an asset acquisition year, trade down, not only for this year, but also to get capital for 2022 when you have a draft where you should have much more information than you do coming off a pandemic year. This is kind of not sexy, maybe not thrilling, but it might be the wisest course of action for these Broncos.
And George Payton has a 6-year contract. He can do that and take a step back. And so, Mace, you're going cornerback for your third. I'm going defensive line. And you touched on Shelby Harris a lot. But, Mace, the Broncos let Jarrell Casey go earlier this offseason. Now it is officially the legal tampering period. It is past
ding, ding,
10
ding, ding,
o'clock.
ding, ding, ding,
so there we go. Deals can be signed, and free agents can now talk to other teams, which means Shelby Harris can now talk to other teams. They can't let him go and not replace him. If they let him go, Mace, defensive line is a massive priority. And because he can talk to other teams now, it's a massive priority right now. You have Draymond Jones, who you feel comfortable being a starter. You have Mike Purcell, and then you have a massive hole there. You could sign 2 guys and then feel comfortable, but you have to get another starter, another big-time starter there. Shelby Harris is going to cost around $10 million. And Mace, if you put $10 million there, then that hole is plugged. You feel really good about it. But if you lose a $10 million player, it's a massive hole right there.
Right. And again, I don't know if the market is going to bring in a guy who's apples for apples. Now, you're confident in Draymond Jones becoming a starter, and you have players who can play. I mean, Deshaun Williams can step in and hold down the fort, and McTelvin Najim, you're counting on him delivering more, but these guys aren't Shelby Harris. They're not Shelby Harris right now. They may never be Shelby Harris. Of course, it took Shelby Harris a while as well. So that's, if you believe in how a young player is developing, like McTelvin Najim, and playing the long game with him, then you may say, okay, with time he could become somebody who fills that role. There's a lack of options there in terms of replicating Shelby if you let him go. So if he's not back, D-line goes at the priority list. If the Broncos don't choose not to exercise the option on Von Miller, I would actually say edge rusher. If the Broncos don't exercise the option on Von Miller, that goes right there kind of behind cornerback for me. The only reason why it doesn't go higher is that you do have 2 guys you can start in Bradley Chubb and Malik Reed. You've got a tandem you can work with, but the Broncos could look at that situation and say, if we lose Von Miller, maybe we've got to take a look at, for example, I'll give you a name, Leonard Floyd, who played for Vic Fangio in Chicago and had double-digit sacks last year for the Rams playing under Brandon Staley. He would probably make more sense for the Chargers, perhaps, if Staley wants to just add to what they already have. The one area they're stacked is edge rusher, but if not, Broncos could look at Leonard Floyd if they move on from Von Miller, someone who knows exactly what Vic Fangio wants. And by the way, was drafted by the Bears while Fangio was there, part of the 2016 draft class, going into Vic's second year.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And Mace, that's why edge rusher is number 4 for me. And how about this tweet, Mace? You said earlier in the podcast how the Broncos haven't had any leaks about what they're going to do. And while this isn't a leak, maybe check in, feel in the water temperature from Mike Kliss right now. He says, while no decision has been made on whether the Broncos would pick up Von Miller's $7 million option, don't rule out possibility of Von wanting to move on and Broncos wanting to go in another direction. Could make sense for both sides to have an amicable split. Wow. All right. So, I mean, maybe that's purely just Mike saying it. Maybe that's testing the waters. But Mace, if you let Vaughn go, this is absolutely on the priority list. And for me, this would come in at number 4. And like you said, the reason why I'm keeping it behind defensive line is because you have a Pro Bowler there with Shelby or with Bradley Chubb, and you do have Malik Reed, who you like. Whereas defensive line, you have someone that you like as a starter, and that's Draymond Jones, but he's not a Pro Bowler. And then you just have a huge gap in between. But Mace, if Von Miller does move on from the Broncos, it would be a huge blow for Broncos fans. I know that, but it would save and open up $18 million for George Paton to spend against the cap. And that is money that he can use to go out and fill all these other holes we've talked about.
Or it's money that you're taking and carrying over to next year when you expect things might be more stabilized in terms of revenue as well. One thing I do not expect this year is I don't expect, unless Deshaun Watson is coming in, I don't expect the Broncos to spend to the cap. I expect the Broncos will have carryover again.
Yeah. And that's not the worst thing, Mace. It's not.
It's not. But I think everyone's kind of looking at the cap space and thinking, okay, here. I would be flabbergasted and shocked, happily shocked, but shocked if they spend to the cap this year. So
yeah,
if you free up room with Von Miller, that's well and good. But I don't think all of a sudden you take that and you spend elsewhere, unless you do pull off the Russell Wilson or Deshaun Watson. More likely Deshaun Watson, because Russell Wilson has not expressed any indication of interest in Denver. So maybe that's what you're thinking. And also, if you're thinking about Deshaun Watson, you don't enhance your chances of getting Deshaun Watson or Deshaun Watson wanting to come here if you cut Kareem Jackson. So what if it's a scenario, Zach, where you're letting go of Von Miller and not picking up his option, but you're picking up Kareem Jackson in part because you want to keep that door ajar to get Deshaun Watson, because all roads lead back to Deshaun Watson, and there we go.
Right, exactly. And by moving on from Kareem Jackson, Mace, you only save roughly half of what you would save by moving on from Vaughn. Kareem saves you $10 million against the cap with $2.8 million dead, and Vaughn saves $18 million in cap money with only $4 million dead. And those are all decisions that George Paton will weigh over the next day or two, along with all of the RFAs.
Yeah, and the thing that you have to think about if you're George Paton is this. Malik Reed's contract this year, in terms of what he is under the cap, it's $855,000. And so literally, not only you save the $18 million, but if you compare them together, if Vaughn is on the roster with his option picked up, it's a $22.125 million cap hit. Malik Reed is literally 3.86% of Von Miller in terms of salary. 3.86%. Yet, what is Malik Reed in terms of what percentage he is compared to Von Miller? Is Malik Reed 70% of Von Miller?
Yeah.
Even 50% of Von Miller.
Right.
And when you're sitting down and trying to stuff everything into not only what your cap is, but also what your cash budget is, then it becomes a move that makes sense. It makes financial sense to make it. Look, I know that for a lot of Broncos fans, it's not going to make sense in terms of the heart and what Von Miller means. I get that. But it could make sense in the broader picture beyond this. It could make sense in the overall roster construction. Saying.
Yeah, it really could. And I know a lot of people out there in the comment section are chanting for Shaq, and man, would that be something else? I would certainly love it. He's going to maybe be the most sought after free agent now that he can talk to anyone. So he would certainly cost a lot of money. So Mace, would you rather have Shaq or Vaughn on a similar deal?
On a similar deal, I'd rather have Shaq because he's younger.
Right.
But looks like we're getting in a report here. Hang on, I'm just trying to queue this up here. One sec on my other computer. Jacina Anderson used to work for ESPN. Jacina says she got a text from Shaq Barrett saying, quote, I am going back to Tampa, unquote.
All right.
So that's it. Forget about that. It's done. It's gone.
I mean, and boy, Tampa, what they're doing out there. Heck, maybe if the Broncos move on from Von will join JPP and Shaq out there in Tampa. And I love the dominoes are starting to fall, Mace. I absolutely love it. Mace, any other priorities for the Broncos? Any that you would throw behind at the end of this group?
Well, I think there was a thought of inside linebacker, perhaps, but the two guys who I think would have been the best fits were Matt Milano in Buffalo and Levante David from Tampa Bay, and they're both staying home. So inside linebacker, I think realistically, maybe you do add a guy, but I think inside linebacker probably slides down the priority list. You're fine. I mean, I know you want more in coverage, and that's why you got Justin Strnad coming back, and maybe you invest a draft pick in someone who's got some upside there. Maybe you're not going for a linebacker in round 1, but maybe you're talking about a Chaz Surratt in round 2 or round 3, someone who's got a lot of talent, a lot of physical tools, but is a very, very much an unfinished product. I think that's probably what you're looking at an inside linebacker more than what's on the free agent market right now. So inside linebacker is a priority, but maybe that priority is something that's down the list a little bit. I think the other, if you don't bring Philip Lindsay back, maybe you kick the tires on running backs a little bit, but that too, I believe, is a need that is more likely to be filled in the draft. And that's where if you get maximum flexibility, Zach, because you can look at your running back core and look and lose Philip Lindsay and say, all right, we got Melvin Gordon, Royce Freeman, and Levante Bellamy. Okay, we can work with that trio. And it's viable. It can work for a season. But if they have maximum draft flexibility, I would not be surprised to see them take a running back early, maybe even much earlier than people anticipate. Maybe if there's a trade down or two, even a round 1 running back. Ooh. If they're picking in the 20s.
Yes, a potential Najee Harris after 2 trade backs.
Yeah, and would Najee Harris make sense at 9? No. Could you argue for Najee Harris at, say, pick 25 or 26? Absolutely.
Right.
But you can't do that unless you have taken care of things in free agency to where you have a roster. You have a 22 plus a nickelback plus a wide receiver 3, which the Broncos obviously have, and then your specialist taken care of. If you've done that, and then you can look at the draft and say, we can do anything. We can trade down, we can trade up, we can go BPA. We don't have to worry about position. And that, I think, this year in a low information draft is what you want to have anyway. You don't want to be in a position where you're reaching because you say, okay, we have to get a guy at this position. You want to just be able to take the best guy. Maybe the guy that you know the most about. Maybe that's where someone like Najee Harris in the mid-20s, coming from out of Alabama, proven program, you know what you're getting with him. Kind of like you knew what you were getting with Jonathan Taylor last year. The Colts did, and they picked him. This is something that maybe you kind of cling to in this year's draft when, because of the pandemic, because there's no combine, and there was no Shrine Game, there's no Collegiate Bowl. You got less information than you do most years.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Mason. And you mentioned inside linebacker, and I agree with you that it is on the priority list. In fact, it may be higher on the Broncos' priority list than it is on our priority list. A couple names to keep an eye on: Eric Wilson. The Vikings just signed Anthony Barr, so it looks like he will hit the market. Of course, George Paton has a ton of familiarity with him, a guy that's fast, a guy that is very, very versatile. He can do a ton on defense, so he could be your answer in coverage. And Jayon Brown, keep an eye on him as well. Another versatile, fast, athletic linebacker. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Broncos go that route and Vic Fangio finally signs off on the linebacker.
Yeah. Anthony Barr, the revised contract, that was just put out there in the last hour or so. So he's a free agent next year, but they're keeping him around. And
exactly.
And so, yeah, you may look at this and look, Alexander Johnson and Joseph Jewell, they're not a bad duo. They work well together. What you're looking for is that dynamic coverage element. But you in the draft, for example, the best coverage linebacker per se in terms of the draft is Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah over Notre Dame. But he's kind of a big box safety, I mean, and a small linebacker. So perhaps he's not somebody where you're saying, okay, you plug him in there. And so you get in the draft. I think the only one, if you move him inside, is Micah Parsons. But for me, there are too many character questions on Micah Parsons to roll the dice on unless he slips into round 2. And then I'm saying, okay, fine, the risk-reward ratio is there. I certainly don't think it's there at 9.
Right. Exactly, Mace. Man, so much to talk about, and so much this week impacts the draft to see if the Broncos will be interested in JOK with Patrick Surtain, with a quarterback in that first round. So much depends on it, and we've got a lot of time to talk, and we will be here as now the legal tampering window is open. And thank you all so much for everyone that tuned in. We had a lot of people tune in on YouTube, but for those of you that aren't tuning in on YouTube, watching some other place, we really recommend going to our YouTube page where the quality is the best. Hit us with a like, please, if you're there right now. We'd really appreciate it. Subscribe and also sign up for alerts so you know anytime we go live, which we'll be doing a lot this week. I'm sure about it. Thank you guys so much. And one more thing that we ask, why don't you join our family over at DNVR.com, because we would love to have you. Not only do you get the exclusive ability to comment on our pods and have that read on every single pod, which we're about to jump into right now, but you get a free DNVR shirt with an annual membership. You get the DNVR Locker weekly member. You get the big beer for the price of a small beer over at the DNVR bar. You get chances to hop on our live stream. And right now, for the next couple hundred members who sign up, you will get a free recovery holistic stick from Holistic Wellness. It's a CBD stick that packs 10 milligrams of CBD. All you do is pour it in your drink, stir, and it helps with recovery. So visit them at holisticwellness.com, HOLISTIK wellness.com. And better yet, you'll get 30% off your first purchase using code DNVR30. And of course, become a member with us. Get all of the perks, including the members Discord, where you can talk to us and other diehard fans, and you'll get this holistic stick for free. So make sure to check us out over at thednvr.com. But Mace, that'll do it for us on the live side. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Let's hop into the questions on the pod side.